Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to our fifth and final installment of Everyday Theology. I hope the past month has been useful and enlightening in some way. I've done my best to share some insights that I've used in the past and continue to use as I try to evaluate culture from a theological standpoint. But I also wanted to maybe take a little bit of a departure for our final session today. I was thinking that since this lesson is going to be released on All Saints' Day, that there might be some utility in talking a little bit about sainthood and vocation and calling, because when we talk about everyday theology, we aren't just talking about sort of like what we see in the world, but also like how we participate in it. And so I thought it might be a good opportunity to sort of talk about that for a little bit. So this will probably it's going to be a little bit different. I don't have some slides for you today. It's going to be a little bit more personal, and hopefully you'll find some application in that as well as I share a little bit of my story and my musings and where those have taken me in the past and how I feel like they'll be leading me in the future. So start off with, like, since I already said this is a little bit about sainthood, let's talk about that a little bit, because I think sainthood is something that kind of gets like a bad name in Protestant communities. We don't talk about it all that much. At least we didn't when I was growing up in a Baptist church, which, as I've gotten older, I've started to realize is a little bit ironic, because if there's any tradition that should be talking about sainthood, it's probably the Protestant tradition, because of our sort of adherence to the idea that we believe in the sainthood of all believers. It's not just not just Peter and Paul and Mary, a band name. I didn't actually mean to do that, but that are saints. But actually, that sainthood is a mantle that we all carry in some way. So I wanted to sort of unpack that a little bit and maybe what that looks like for me and hopefully for you as well. So I wanted to start with this. With a little bit of a reading that I've been working on over the past week or so. It's a book by a Jesuit priest named James Martin. He's a great writer. If you ever have any interest in reading some sort of applications of culture and theology, he has some really great works out there. But this one was of particular interest for me. It's been sitting on my shelf for almost a year. I got it for Christmas last year, and it's called A Jesuit Off-Broadway. And it's about it's sort of a memoir about his experience of being a theological advisor / after a while, a chaplain for a production of a play in New York called The Last Days of Judas Iscariot, which was a play written in the early 2000s that sort of was exploring the fate of Judas after death, which is sort of like an interesting question. But what's really interesting about this book is outside of like sort of the shop talk that I enjoy as a theater maker, is also sort of his engagement with the cast and the way in which they were sort of were bringing to light some understanding about his theology that he maybe hadn't even articulated in the same way before. So I want to start by reading a little passage to you, because I think it'll set the tone for what we are talking about today. And this is him talking about sainthood. Great. So without further ado, I'll read just a little bit for you. So, more often than not, sanctity is confused with perfection, which means that the saints are often seen as either inhuman or superhuman. Thus, the revelation of any flaws is viewed as a threat to their image. Contrary to this, Martin contends that holiness makes its home among human imperfections. Some of the saints could even be unpleasant, particularly in their single-minded pursuit of their vision. Stories of their quirky behavior are sometimes related by their most devoted admirers as marks of their underlying humanity. When Mother Teresa once visited the United States, she immediately instructed American sisters in her religious order to get rid of their washing machines. The sisters should be living more simply, she declared, and should wash the clothes and bed sheets of the sick by hand, as her sisters in India did. So not always the softest, most easily approached human beings, some of these saints. They have some rough edges, and don't we all? Another passage. Another misconception is that the saints are carbon copies of one another, all of them blandly pious men and women locked in constant prayer. But even the most cursory glance at their biographies reveals an extraordinary diversity in their personalities, their likes and dislikes, and the courses their lives took. They worked, prayed, and loved differently. They thought differently, too, and even quarreled. Perhaps the earliest example of this is the fierce debate that took place around AD 51 between St. Paul and Saints Peter, James, and John over whether the Christian message should be extended to non-Jews. Paul won out, and the gospel was taken to the Gentiles, with Peter and his friends no doubt nursing disappointment for a time. A more contemporary understanding of sanctity is that it means not perfection, which is unattainable, but being true to the person you are meant to be, the person created by God. Believers are called to follow as best they can their individual paths to holiness. The goal of every Christian is to grow in love and charity, but this common goal is lived out in different ways. As Thomas Merton, who's another Catholic writer, once said, "For me, to be a saint means to be myself, but being oneself, or even being a saint, does not mean being perfect." So, that to me is like an important primer for sort of what we are thinking about when we talk about the sainthood of all believers, and not just the ones that are esteemed by certain orders of the Christian tradition. And it made me think about, when I was reading that chapter this week, it made me think about this play that I was supposed to be working on earlier this year, back in March, right before the world shut down. I was about to begin working on a production at the Warehouse Theater of a play called 100 Saints You Should Know. And this play follows the story of a priest and a woman who works as a cleaning lady in the rectory, and how they are on this converging path of the priest sort of losing his understanding of how to pray, and the cleaning lady seeking for some sort of connection with something bigger than herself. And so along this path, they kind of intersect at a place where they end up, because of their various experiences, end up being able to minister to one another in ways that they wouldn't have been able to, in ways that are perhaps maybe unexpected or unsettle like the usual roles that you would think they would play for one another. So it's a beautiful play that that really takes faith as in all its complexity, and looks at faith as a journey and not as like a destination. And so it was a really beautiful play that I felt like very equipped to direct. And one of the reasons I felt, obviously because I have like a theological background as well as an artistic background, but it's also because it's this idea of the sainthood of all believers is something that I really adhere to, and the title of the play, I think, is something is an indication that the playwright Kate Fodor sort of has a sense of the same idea, right? That it's in the deepness of who we are that we find our most specific path to holiness. Um, so and I have to admit that I've stolen a story that I used in context of like preparing for this play. I told this to my designers, and I stole this story from Dr. Rich, that he shared on All Saints Day a couple of years ago, and I think it's really relevant to us now, in this time and in this conversation. So he told the story, and some of you may have heard this before if you were there a couple of years ago on All Saints Day. But I think it's a beautiful story, and I think it's worth reminding us about it. That there was a father and a young child who went into a church one day, and they were walking down the aisles of this beautiful church, and there was stained glass all around them. And the young boy paused, and he looked up, and he looked at one of the pictures of these stained glass windows, and he asked his father, "Who are those people, Dad?" And the father replied, "Well, you know what, son? Those people are the saints." And the son replied, "Dad, who are the saints?" And the father was caught for just a moment, and he was wondering like how he was going to answer this deep theological question for his young son about who are the saints. But before he could get his word in, there was, a bright shaft of sunlight that came through these windows into the church. And the boy paused, and he said, "Wait, stop, Dad. I know who the saints are. The saints are the ones that the light shines through." And the first time I heard that story, I was taken aback by about the truth, and the truth in that sentiment, right? There's another great church writer and leader, named Saint Irenaeus, who might have expressed this in a different way, which is that the glory of God is the human fully alive. And I think that these two ideas sort of work in concert with one another. That sainthood is about being fully oneself in a way that brings glory to God. So for me, I truly believe that the way that I let the light shine through me is through the process of collaborating with other artists to tell stories that bring a sense of goodness and beauty and truth into the world. For some of you, it might be running a business with a level of integrity that garners respect and asks and begs employees to ask like how you are the way you are in the world, right? For others of you, it might be making a home for your family that is secure and contributes to the health and well-being of everybody around you. For some of you, it might be cultivating community, whether that's through political action or service or whatever it is that is inherent in who you are that helps you shine God's light into the world. And so I guess my hope for you as a sort of a closing and parting thought on our month-long adventure into everyday theology is to spend some time this week thinking about like, what is your vocation in the world, right? What is it that lets God's light shine through you? What is your specific and unique path to sainthood? And I think if you can spend some time praying and meditating on that, and finding ways to express that into the world, I think that's the best way that we can live out our everyday theology. I thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to spend this time with you over the past month. It's been a real gift and a privilege. I hope it's been I hope it's been fun and interesting and enlightening in some way. And I look forward to the opportunity to be safely all together again sometime in the future. With all that said, grace and peace to you, and we'll see you soon.